Jessica, let's start here. Who is the standard from your demographics NWSL fan? I'm talking about age, demographics, race. Like, just hit me with what your data tells you is your average fan.
Well, the place where we're seeing the most traction and the most growth is that young 18 to 49 fan. We skew female, but we have a pretty strong contingent of male supporters. They tend to be technologically savvy, high household income, and really representative of the communities where we play. And for that reason, we've been able to really scale our business with media partners and sponsors because they're the people that buyers really want to reach.
Where are we in terms of the growth cycle of the league? Because we were talking a little bit off camera, and like it wasn't that long ago that you guys were kind of a shoestring operation, let's say. You're clearly not that today. So I'm just curious, as you envision the league's growth profile, what inning are we in?
Yeah, I'll use chapters so that we're not using another league's analogy.
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
That
doesn't really work either.
We'll do minutes.
Yes, minutes.
We're just at the start of the game. I think the early days of the NWSL are a unique point in time in our league's history, but actually it is even predated by professional women's leagues in our sport that started and failed 3 times prior. And that was really the history of professional women's soccer in this country. And remember, it had the overlay of this incredible success at the national team level, where the U.S. women's national team was consistently winning on an international stage. And it was always the question, when is it or why is it that professional women's soccer has not been able to find its footing? And it was really in 2022 when the league made a decision to detach itself from U.S. Soccer, which is the federation that governs the sport in this country, and build itself as a standalone league with owners and purpose-built infrastructure for training and playing and a standalone business plan, that we've really been able to see the league take off. So although we've been in existence for more than 10 years, I like to say we're really in our 4th season since we started building a purpose-built strategy.
And so walk me through that purpose-built strategy. Well, like, why has this worked over the past few years?
I think the first thing is we start with the product, which is the players, which was always there, but people just didn't know about it. And now that we have the amplification from media partners and others, people are starting to realize that the best players in the world actually play professional women's soccer right here in this country. And so if you love this sport or you love athleticism and greatness, the NWSL is probably somewhere near your backyard and you can go and see a game or watch a game on TV. The second thing is really about our ownership. And I think this is probably the most transformative change that we made. I believe we sold about 2/3 of our teams in the first 2.5 years. And it was really a process of bringing in the next generation of owners, people who not only had the financial resources to invest, but had the interest and willingness to invest, who had a long-term view on what their return on investment could be.
Did you need to sell those people, or did they sort of have the view in their mind already when they came to the table?
I think it was a combination. Certainly there was an interest, and we're so fortunate that we're in a moment or a movement, as many people have referred to it, in women's sports, where the appetite to find opportunities to invest in women's sports, there are not that many that are established and have the professionalism and the organization to give people the confidence to invest not tens of millions of dollars, but hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. How long do you think this moment lasts in women's sports?
We're not going back. And the time has come, and it has proven itself over and over and over again that when you invest in the product, like has happened on the men's side, it will grow, like all professional sports leagues in this country. And that's because this is a country that loves competitiveness. They love greatness. They love stars. There are brands who are thriving and want to invest in the things that help them to reach a captive audience, and sports is the vehicle for that.
Let me go back to sort of another demographic type question. I know in the WNBA, there's not that much overlap between fans of the WNBA and fans of the NBA. Is that the case also for the NWSL and Major League Soccer?
It's surprising but true. And we know this, similar to the WNBA, NBA dynamic, because some of our owners are shared. And so they have the data for season ticket holders, and they have the data from social media to compare where there's opportunity for cross promotion. And there is a very different audience that comes in for the National Women's Soccer League.
Do you use the MLS as sort of a proxy of where you can get to, or is that not the right benchmark for you guys?
I think for some of the challenges and opportunities we have, MLS is a really great benchmark. For example, they made the decision 15, 20 years ago to build purpose-built stadiums because they knew that if you had an opportunity to influence or control your stadium and the place where you play your games, you would have greater opportunity for commercialization of your assets. And that is an example. They've also done a ton of work that has paved the way for growth at the youth space that we're learning from in terms of MLS. But in other ways, we find ourselves very different and distinguishable. And the main differentiator for the NWSL is that we're the tip of the sphere in professional women's soccer globally. And that is a privilege and an opportunity that we do not take for granted.
I was talking to Alexis Ohanian, and he was saying that, when he started thinking about investing in women's soccer, he was like, well, the women are the best at soccer, and like the men are historically terrible. So to him, it was like an obvious thing of like, I should invest here and not here. Do you see the women's dominance as a potential long-term advantage for the future of the NWSL in terms of where the league's positioning is relative to European leagues? In other words, how much of a threat are these European leagues where they're clearly the dominant leagues in men's soccer? Will they become, do you fear they will become the dominant leagues in women's soccer? Or is the American dominance in this sport enough with your league's current presence to sort of stave off the competition?
Well, I think this is a question that's being asked everywhere. And I think from our perspective and the way that we look at it, being an independent league where we are not in the shadows of the men's league and we are not making decisions based in any way on what's in the best interest for men's professional soccer, which is our unique differentiator, is ultimately our superpower. The other thing that's our superpower is the history of governance and the strength of centralized power that exists in professional sports leagues in this country, which is also so different from the rest of the world, including places like the Premier League and other leagues that have men's and women's leagues. And the reason for that differentiator and the reason that's such a superpower is because our league is competitive. It means that anytime you watch a game, whether you're watching the number 1 team play the number 4 team or the number 14 team or the number 1 team play the number 2 team, it's going to be a competitive game. And there's a reason to watch. And there are not these 6-0 or 8-0 blowouts. And that's not what you see in places like Europe, where, yes, they are investing in women, which we hope will create an opportunity for more players to develop at the top level.
You had to sort of clean up the image of the league, I would say, when you came in here, right? There were stories of harassment at teams, sexual harassment. Do you feel like that chapter is completely behind you at this point?
I don't think you can ever say when you've gone through something like that it's a closed chapter and it's behind you. It is part of our history. It is something that we will always have to attend to and prioritize, even when, and especially when, things are going well. And that's because those issues that were so pervasive in our league were not only endemic in the NWSL. We have to be honest with ourselves and say that they presented themselves in our league and created tremendous challenges, but they exist in our country, they exist in youth sports for girls, and they exist for women everywhere. And so with those headwinds that exist around women and girls playing sports and our history, it is always something that we will prioritize.
Is it something that you feel, given your stature, is that you can use your influence to change the culture, not just in your league, but in sort of the youth ranks or the college ranks?
Unequivocally, yes, and not just in this country. We have made an intentional effort actually to open source all of our systemic reform that we've done in the NWSL, sharing it with all of the professional women's leagues
Like what?
in
Like
the world.
specifically?
Things about our investigation procedure, things about our harassment and discrimination policy, things about how we handle reform when we have situations where a coach may need some advice or guidance about how to handle tough situations and do it in a way that's positive and reinforcing the kind of values and expectations that we have of people in the technical environment. And there just haven't historically been a lot of resources provided in that space from a league perspective to be able to support the ecosystem, which is in service of creating the best environment for the players so that the best players can rise to the top and perform at the highest level. It's a business imperative.
Yeah, you mentioned one of the things that this was sort of systemic in our country or endemic. I'll ask you one kind of politics question. Anecdotally, I've spoken to soccer fans who have said that their family has been afraid to come to live event soccer games because they have feared ICE raids and potential deportation. Have you seen that at all as the commissioner of this league, where there has been a bit of an attendance pullback because of those fears?
We haven't seen anything like that in our league. What I can say, knowing that it exists, is that we are laser focused on leaning into our values and who we are, which is an inclusive league where anyone and everyone is welcome to come and enjoy our games. And in fact, when we do fan research and ask them what it is that attracts them to our league, they tell us that the NWSL provides them with a sense of belonging that they don't feel in other aspects of their life. And for that reason, we think our presence in communities is even more important. And we're just going to continue to show up and do the things that represent who we are.
The valuations for the teams have consistently grown. I'll get to that in a second. But this year, looking at the TV ratings data and attendance, it's down a little bit from last year. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think you have to look beneath the top line numbers, because if you look at our composite numbers, inclusive of digital, we're actually up. And I think that's representative of a shift we're seeing in viewing habits for television viewers and fans. And we shared earlier what our demographics are. We're young, we're technologically savvy, and what that means is that when we provide opportunities for our fans to watch it on their phones or watch it through apps, they're going to find those opportunities, because the majority of our fan base is not the 55 plus who tends to be watching traditionally on their
What
couch.
about in-person attendance, though? That's also down a little bit, no, from last year?
It's down very slightly, but we're seeing that even this past week in our return to play following the summer break, that the numbers are climbing back up, and we're really confident that we're going to finish the season strong, particularly with some of the storylines that are emerging around the league and seeing how our international players performed as well as they did on an international stage over these last few weeks.
The WNBA has had a lot of success by sort of capitalizing on NIL and the sort of star making that happens in college. As those players then progress to the league, they can use that pre-made stardom and ride it through the professional ranks. We're just starting to see it, but it's happened now for a couple of years. Is there a way for you guys to somehow tap into the college ranks? Or, NIL is probably not as big of a deal for soccer as it is for basketball, but it seems like they have a ready-made advantage that perhaps there are ways that you guys can look to turn social media influencers in college into bigger stars. Would know better than me.
It's an unbelievable opportunity if we could figure out how to capitalize on existing infrastructure and investment to help create the foundation for the next generation of stars. So 100% agree. And it's something we're spending a lot of time thinking about. It's one of the reasons that our Chief Operating Officer, Sarah Jones-Simmer, is representing our league on a task force that's being run by U.S. Soccer, focusing on specifically the college game and how we can really connect the dots in the pyramid of women's soccer to support the college game up-leveling, to be able to be in a position to provide that pipeline so that when a player is young and imagining playing in the NWSL, she knows where to go, and that when she gets to college, she'll have those opportunities that exist for college women's basketball.
Are you worried about these new NIL rules in the sense that there will be some colleges that perhaps are now strapped for cash and may need to pull back on women's soccer or other sports that are not football?
I think you would be missing something as an American if you're not worried about that today. I don't think you could find a single person who would say that Title IX is not in jeopardy today with some of the changes in the commercialization of some of the big sports and the introduction of NIL and what I refer to as the unintended consequences of that. It is my hope and expectation that people are paying attention to that and doing everything they can to protect Title IX, not only because our league and the WNBA has benefited from that, but if you care about the U.S. winning gold medals, if you care about providing opportunities to young girls, you should care about protecting Title IX.
Yeah. I wonder if there needs to be some sort of regulation that steps in there to reinforce that from a government standpoint. Is that probably what needs to happen?
I mean, I think there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to operate in the world that has now been created. I think when they opened the floodgates to NIL, I don't think anyone contemplated what was going to happen as a result, and it happened faster than anybody imagined. So I think a lot of people are trying to figure this out, and we're not quite a bystander because it has an indirect effect on us, but not really at the intersection of where that hard work is being done.
I'll return to the ownership and valuation standpoint. So you've got teams that are worth $100 million, $250 million at this point. I think that was the valuation for when Bob Iger and Willow Bay bought Angel City. How high can this go? I mean, is there a world in the not too distant future where you feel like you'll have billion-dollar valued franchises?
Definitely yes. There is nothing systemically or otherwise that would stand in the way of our valuations continuing to grow the way that men's valuations have grown in professional sports. And if you spoke with Alexis Ohanian, you know that his thesis is that this sport will reach $1 billion valuation before any other could or would in the short trajectory of our growth thus far. So we're really confident that we're on the right track, and we have to continue to do the things that increase the value proposition for all of our key stakeholders, the players, our fans, and our owners and investors to show up in the ways that allow the league to continue to thrive.
There's still a huge delta. I mean, I was looking at some statistics sitting down here. I think overall sponsorship revenues from sponsorship was about $75 million or so for the NWSL. I think for men's, it's like almost $600 million or so. So there's a huge gap between the revenue coming in for the men's league and the women's league. I assume you see that as an enormous investment and growth opportunity, but just technically, I mean, like specifically, what needs to happen to make that number look more like the men's number?
Well, I think it's an education process because obviously the men have had the long history of being able to grow over 75, 100 years. And so the quantity of fans in their databases and in their stands is significant. And it takes a long time to catch up to those sheer numbers. I think the reason you're seeing women's sports, and our league in particular, grow as quickly as we have is because the quality of our fans is different. And we have, and there have been a bunch of research studies on this in the last 2 to 3 years, that they're not one for one because our fans are younger, because it skews female and women control 80% of household spend. We have the ability to reach the demographic that makes the decisions in the home. And that is what will ultimately unlock the growth that we expect to see and have already started to see in a very short period of time.
Look, men's soccer is going to be lower on the totem pole versus other men's sports competition here, just from a factor of historical barriers where the NFL is clearly dominant and the NBA is hugely popular. You don't have the same barriers for women's sports in terms of other leagues, so I would imagine that's an opportunity for the NWSL to potentially rise the ranks in a way that maybe Major League Soccer can't?
I always talk about two things. First, soccer is upon us in this country for the first time. Everyone has wondered, as long as I've been alive, why is it that this is a global game and no one cares?
I feel like I heard that 25 years ago that
people have
soccer was
been
upon us,
asking
though,
that
right?
question. Well, but now we actually have the Men's World Cup coming here. We have the Women's World Cup coming here, all within a few years' time, plus the Olympics.
Yeah.
I really do, the Club World Cup. I really do believe between those things and the permeation of the digital and streaming assets that are coming in from the Premier League and other global men's soccer properties, it is in the cultural zeitgeist. The sport is in the cultural zeitgeist of America. And when you love the sport of soccer and you want to see greatness and you care about women, we are at the intersection of that. And so it's natural that we feel like we're in a place to capitalize on this.
You plan on playing games during the Men's World Cup, correct? The
We do.
NWSL will be in season.
We do.
Is there any way to kind of capitalize on the World Cup being here?
We intend to capitalize on the World Cup being here. It's both a challenge and an opportunity because we share a lot of the facilities, or we are home in a lot of the facilities that the Men's World Cup will be using. And as a result, we have a little bit of dislocation happening. All that being said, we think it's more of an opportunity than a challenge because so many people are going to be here paying attention to the sport. And we think there's a real opportunity, and we're working on some really big plans to put ourselves in the intersection of the psyche of the people who are here caring about the sport of soccer.
You guys fairly recently constructed a CBA, so I believe that ends in 2030, correct?
That's right.
Where the minimum pay for players will jump from what it has been to the end of the contract. I think it's something like, you tell me the exact numbers, in the 48,000-ish range for minimum pay to 82,000-ish.
That's right.
Toward the end. Is that enough? Is the hope that by the end of this CBA, the overall pay for these players will take another significant leap?
Well, the beauty of the new CBA that we negotiated last year is that we have a proper revenue sharing program with the players where every dollar that we make at the league level supports the increase in how our players can get paid under our salary cap. And so it's our hope that the things that we imagined last year when we negotiate that are just the floor, and that we'll beat all of our projections and get our players to a place where they can continue to get paid as our business grows.
Last question. A couple of your biggest stars have recently retired. How do you make the next generation of star? And is there a way that you can expand the horizon of what stardom means? In other words, it's one thing to be a star within the world of women's soccer fans. It's another thing, and you've had a couple of examples of it, where they kind of break out. Is there something you can do as the commissioner of this league to help that happen?
Well, I think empower the players. I think that we've seen that with the NBA and how it's inured to their benefit from a business perspective. There are no shackles on our players. We not only want to encourage them to find their voice and to partner with brands, but we are actually actively facilitating it. We have monthly meetings with our union and our players to talk about this. I do market visits and meet with every single player in the league to talk about the importance of them building their brand. But the thing that makes me confident that our next generation of stars are going to become those household names is the place we're seeing the most growth across any platform we have is TikTok. And a lot of that is being driven by our players who are 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. I think we might be the only league that has under 18 players playing professional. These are the players or the people who are influencing the social media platforms that permeate teenagers who are going to be controlling our economy in very short order. And so with those growth signals that we see across our ecosystem, we're really confident that our players are stars and are going to be recognized as stars.
Jessica, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.